one of the nice surprises about this year's Oscar nominees is that District 9 is well represented all throughout categories, including the category of editing. And we got a chance, Jerry and I, to speak to the editor of District 9, and some more great conversation about what it feels like to be a first-time nominee for an Oscar and involved in a major renowned project, and how it's changed his life, and how he's brushing shoulders with other Oscar nominees, and he's geeking out. So that makes him a perfect subject for an interview with us. His name is Julian Clarke, the editor of District 9. Here he is.
Well, we were actually shortlisted last year in the long-form category, so I kind of knew the steps, and I found myself going through the exact same steps.
Okay, I'm so sorry. That was not Julian Clarke. Sorry. That's a sneak preview of our next interview tonight. That was the first part of Daniel Junge. Jerry, I promise. Now we're going to play Julian Clarke. Are you ready? Okay. You're in Canada. You're editing a new project right now, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm working in Toronto right now. Usually I'm Vancouver based, but yes, I'm in miserable Toronto right
now. Let me talk to you first about your beginnings, and then we'll get into District 9. I won't take up too much of your time, but when did you know that you wanted a career in filmmaking and a career in editing in particular?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of people who go into film school, everyone kind of thinks they want to be a writer-director. So I kind of went in thinking that as well. And then actually when I started making student films and stuff like that, I discovered that I way more preferred the edit room than being on set, and just like it actually feels like a part of the process where you're kind of somewhat in control of what's going on. Like what's that?
You're like basically when you're in the editing suite, you really control everything. You have all the cards in your hand. I mean, that's really where the movie is made or broken.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of, in some ways, actually where the movie is written, because, the finished product is imagery. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I like that kind of one person actually kind of molding something like a painter or something like that. And there's very few professions in the filmmaking process where you can kind of be a sort of singularly creative person like that. Probably writing and composing would be two other processes. But in general, it's like you need a kind of military operation to get anything done. And so I like the demilitarized aspect of editing.
Yeah, I've said that you going to war is like making a movie. There's just so many different components.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, the sort of like set is kind of where the trenches is, and editing is kind of like the intelligence office where they kind of move stuff around on the maps.
Right.
So I like to be more in central command than digging the trenches.
So what did the District 9 opportunity came about because you had worked with the director previously?
No, actually, I hadn't worked with Neil previously. I had worked a whole bunch of times with Clinton Shorter, who was the composer on District 9, and Clinton had worked with Neil on Alive and Joburg, his short film, kind of the inspiration for District 9. So basically, I kind of owe Clinton a huge debt. He basically heard that Neil was kind of looking for an editor in Vancouver, and he's like, gave me my name, and we chatted, and kind of happened from there.
And at what stage do you enter the fray? Do you read the script prior to the shooting of the film?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's, kind of depending on your kind of relationship with the director, you can kind of get into kind of talking about the script and kind of, maybe we needed something like this here and that kind of stuff. That kind of relationship usually only happens with the director you've worked with kind of more than one time. So, like, I read the script, but there wasn't a lot of consulting me about my thoughts on sort of directions for it and stuff like that. So, yeah, my role really in terms of creative input really happened once they started shooting.
And when you start to get the footage and you start to tinker with it, do you have conversations then about the direction that you want to take, or do you just fly and see what they think of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of a bit of both. I mean, I think obviously you want to kind of be following your own instincts and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's kind of like I don't like to go too far out into left field without kind of keeping the director in the loop, because a lot of the time, even if your left field instincts are correct, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, it's kind of like you just know the director's going to make you go back to kind of first principles to kind of get there, because they kind of need to sort of be part of the process of how you arrive there. So sometimes you kind of go, you start off with a kind of conservative version, and then you kind of go into left field, and you kind of go, look, this is why this is the thought process of why I went there, This sort of feels like it's not really working, so I'm thinking of totally reconfiguring and things like this.
What was unique or exciting about District 9 from your point of view, the editor's point of view?
Well, kind of a lot of things, I guess. I mean, it's highly improvised. A lot of we had a kind of an idea of the kind of the sort of narrative flow of the movie, but the actors were very much just sort of changing a lot of the details of the scenes and the dialogue, and then in addition to that, the kind of documentary element was really very approached kind of a sort of a documentary form in terms of editing it. Like the interviews, most of them weren't scripted. It was just people kind of answering in the character as they sort of kind of improvising the answers, or kind of being told the kind of backstory of sort of how to talk about it. Some people were totally non-actors and were just kind of riffing on South Africa. And then we had hours and hours and hours of just B-roll of shanty towns and Johannesburg. So approaching that material was really like editing a kind of legitimate documentary, where you're kind of splicing together different talking head bits to kind of make a kind of concise soundbite that communicates something. And so kind of there was a lot of boiling and reducing, that kind of stuff, especially in the sort of first 20 minutes of the movie, where you kind of get most of that documentary element in terms of sort of setting up the movie. But we had all this immense amount of material to kind of choose from to do that.
Well, it is kind of divided into two parts, the documentary style and then the narrative style starts to kick in. Now, was that transition apparent in the script? Is it something that you found in the editing?
Yeah, well, I was very worried about it, because you sometimes think of it as that you kind of set up kind of rules to your world, your film world, and then you follow it. And we kind of we didn't really do that, because we sort of start off with basically having almost kind of 100% documentary camera, which is an acknowledged camera. Characters talk to it, and it's like very much there. It's like there's a cameraman in the scene, and then everything else is kind of news perspectives or things that can generally be justified. And then at a certain point in the film, it's like that camera is gone, and it's just verite kind of Jason Bourne then, It's like a shaky camera that feels newsy, but it is not a camera that is actually present there. This is a cinematic perspective. And I was worried. I was like, we're kind of setting up one set of rules, and then we're kind of going into another. But it happens very gradually, and so far I haven't actually heard anyone kind of call us on it. They kind of just accept it because the styles are very similar.
Right.
So yeah, it was kind of a thing where we just kind of sort of sneakily kind of eased into it being 100% cinematic. And then occasionally you go back, like you have like when Vicus is captured, you have the weapons test sequence where it becomes a kind of acknowledged camera again for a little bit. So kind of, we kind of went back and forth and kind of eased into it, and by the very end, it's pretty much 100% cinematic.
Does that translate into a different tone or a different pace in your actual cutting throughout the movie?
Well, I think those two different things, I don't think really too much sort of dictated the pace. It was really just kind of like, in some ways, just the movie itself sort of changes in terms of what it's about too. Like it starts off being this kind of more observational, here's this kind of weird alien shantytown world, and let's explore it. And then it turns into this thing where it really becomes a kind of action sci-fi thing and kind of gets more and more heightened. So the kind of the ramping up of the story just sort of obviously sort of changes the whole tempo of the cutting.
And how do the special effects affect your job as an editor? Is that an extra challenge piled on to the job?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fortunately, Neil, who is like a former animator, he's incredibly experienced and kind of, very knowledgeable of this stuff. So he was obviously sort of, when he was confident in something, you could kind of be confident in it too. So he was invaluable in the process. Dealing with the aliens was actually relatively straightforward, not for the effects people, but for the editing process. Generally speaking, almost every alien in the movie is played by one guy, this guy, Jason Cope, who's actually one of the interviewees. He plays the kind of news reporter Bradnam. So he basically is kind of one of the unsung heroes of the project, where he would sort of be improvising as an alien across some kind of vicus. So he played the Christopher Johnson character as well as most of the aliens that he's evicting. And so it was really just cutting two human performers. And then they would basically paint him out and replace him with an alien and kind of often match sort of what he was doing with his body and then kind of alienize it by making it more insect-like. So very labor-intensive for the effects guys, because not only building a photoreal alien, but they've got to remove the human from the environment, and the human is a different shape than the alien. So, so that was kind of a pain for them, but very good for us. The killer robot in the end, the exosuit that Vicus puts on, that was actually the much bigger challenge, because of course at that scale, there's a human is not the same scale as that. So we really just had empty shots for that. And so you have all these sort of soldiers sort of shooting at something that isn't there, and you're trying to guess, okay, well, it's jumping over that, and then maybe go to another angle here, and it's picking up this, and you're kind of making these sort of decisions in terms of a sort of action sequence, which is really like you're only seeing half of it. You're just seeing the humans shooting at something that's not there. So that was challenging.
Well, if I read this correctly, there were several, if not more than several, different possible endings to the film, and I'm curious what the process was like for you and Neil to whittle down what was the appropriate ending to use.
Yeah, we shot a few different things, but I guess it was always like we didn't want to have anything that felt too sentimental or too solved. So I guess it really was just kind of, we wanted to find something that felt satisfying but had a kind of, I guess slightly kind of complex kind of thing where things were not all wrapped up in a neat, tidy parcel or whatever, like that Vicus is cured or whatever it is.
Bittersweet almost.
So yeah, it was really just sort of finding the one that had the right tone, I guess.
Yeah. The Oscar nomination, was this something that you were, I guess it would be presumptuous to say you were expecting it, but tell me where you were when you heard about it and your immediate reaction.
I think I found out through Facebook. People had posted on my wall. I thought, of course I knew they were announcing it, but I thought they weren't announcing it till like midday or something, so I didn't bother to check, online or whatever, and then I got my wall started to fill up, and then I found out that way. Wow.
This has to be exciting for you.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's it's scary. It's obviously it's an extremely high honor to receive, and I don't know. I hope I can live up to the honor.
Well, you're working now, so I'm sure you weren't able to attend the nominees luncheon, were you?
No, yeah. I'm going to the BAFTAs this coming weekend, so there's sort of other award show things that I'm trying to sort of fit into my work schedule right now. It's a little bit nuts right now.
Right. So do you already see an effect this has had on your career and your opportunities, having been involved in District 9?
Well, certainly, there's definitely just a lot of people who seem just sort of interested in kind of meeting you and sort of talking to you about doing things. So, and there's a real, I guess, street cred to District 9. Smart people kind of seem to like it, and it made money, and it was done on a kind of relatively reasonable amount of money. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of reasons why people are kind of going, that's pretty cool that they pulled that off. So yeah, no, I'm definitely noticing that my life is somewhat different now.
Right. Could you tell us a little bit about the new movie that you're working on? I believe it's called The Whistleblower.
Yeah, it's a movie that stars Rachel Weisz, and it's based on a true story. It's kind of a political thriller set in Bosnia when the UN was there peacekeeping after the Bosnian War. Mm-hmm. And basically this woman discovered that a whole bunch of people in the UN in the mission there were complicit in trafficking women. And then she tried to do something about it, and they fired her. So it's a pretty hard-hitting true story set in Bosnia.
Are you called upon at all to actually be on set? Is there a demand for you to be on set at all?
Not really, no. I mean, you get invited down sometimes. Oh, you should come down. And you're like, well, that's great. Don't shoot 5 hours of footage, and maybe I'll have time to come down. My great fear is like I think this happens now. People talk about it. How like you're obviously now with people sort of shooting on things like Red Camera and HD and stuff like that. There's actually a possibility that you can just have your editor like in essentially a camera truck or on set, where you just have a computer set up there, and then it's kind of like they're just sort of feeding you stuff as you're shooting it, and then the director's sort of wandering over between takes and sort of seeing how you're cutting things. That's like my worst nightmare.
And having that set and watching that happen, we're coming to that point where you can just edit stuff in the next room, right? And it's still filming.
No, I mean, I think it is. Yeah, and I think it happens a lot in commercials, and I think probably happens on some features, where the director sort of is sort of particularly keen in sort of having sort of instant feedback or whatever. Right. So yes, I haven't been subjected to that yet, but I hope to avoid it as long as possible.
Well, just before I let you go, I love to ask questions like this. If you had to choose 2 or 3 seminal movies that define great editing, which ones would they be for you?
2 or 3 great movies for seminal editing. Okay. Well, I think it's hard to separate great movies from great editing. I love 2001. I love City of God, and I'm going to go with Apocalypse Now as well. There you go.
Yeah, these are all awesome choices, awesome editors, and awesome choices. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get better than those. I think you chose wisely.
But
thank you.
Speaking of editing, I don't mean to backtrack, but I was just curious because you mentioned there's a lot like you got going in the left field and you shot a lot of footage. Are there any instances where you went too far, where Neil was like, "No, I don't want to go that way. That's not what I intended," or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I think that happens. I think it happens every time. It's probably if that doesn't happen, then maybe you're being too conservative. I don't know if I can think of pull a specific example out of the air for that, but yeah, certainly it happened, no doubt about that.
Okay.
Do you rely on test screenings at all with District 9? Was there a process like that?
I mean, Peter Jackson really just likes to kind of keep things kind of pretty top secret or whatever, I guess. That's just sort of the way he works. That way you kind of keep a pretty, sort of tight control of the advertising and the buzz and all that kind of stuff. So really it was like our test screenings were basically like showing Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh and our other producers on the project, and they would kind of give their thoughts and stuff like that. So yeah, right. They were basically our sort of various test screenings, and Jackson is a kind of an encyclopedia of knowledge in terms of how to make a successful popcorn movie. So he gave very, very helpful notes and stuff like that at various parts of the process.